Welcome to It's Just Money. On today's episode, we're going to discuss the Federal Reserve. Where's all this money coming from? And is it really safe for us to be talking about opening back up the economy?
We're here to talk about bread, lettuce, cheese, dead presidents, green.
It's just money, man. It's just money.
So the Federal Reserve, really discovered that they exist. I don't know who they are. I don't know if they're part of the government or if they're not a part of the government, but they have the name federal in it. So how are they able to give us $2.3 trillion to start up the economy again? I mean, where does the money even come from?
So that's a good question.
Good question.
The Federal Reserve is very confusing, even for I think the most sophisticated of people. I know it started in 1913, so this is a newer thing. I mean, as a country, because no matter how many times I've ever talked about the Federal Reserve, I just can't even describe it. So I actually called Jack and pre-recorded me asking him some questions about what is the Federal Reserve. So I'd love to play that if you guys are good with that. Let's do a quick intro here for Jack.
I'm Jack Kenyon. I'm a principal with Legacy Advisory in Overland Park, Kansas. We're a registered investment advisor, and we help families plan and invest for their financial futures.
From there, like I said, I asked Jack, what is the Federal Reserve? And we've had Jack on previously in episodes, so it shouldn't be new to you if you're a current listener and subscriber. What is the Federal Reserve?
The Federal Reserve is the central bank of the United States. What that means is it backstops or is the bank to all of the banks throughout the economic system in the United States. Because of the dollar's reserve status, it also happens to be the central bank of the world in some ways, but we don't need to get into that. Essentially, the Fed's primary responsibility is to ensure stable prices throughout the economy so that we don't have too much inflation or deflation, and to try to minimize the amount of unemployment in the system. And the Fed does this primarily by setting interest rates. So the Federal Reserve rate is the most base interest rate that the rest of interest rates are set on. It's not a perfect correlation, but over time, that's what happens. So the Fed's theory and what they try to do is set interest rates at a level that will ensure there's lots of employment without creating a bunch of inflation. The other rule for the last 10 years or so, and in some ways before that, is to act as the guarantor or the backstop of the entire financial system. And the way the Fed does that is, if you think about kind of what's going on in the economy right now, there are a bunch of businesses that got shut down by government fiat, and all those businesses had cash flow coming in, right? They were selling their goods and services, and that brought money into their business. They used that money to go buy goods and pay their employees so that they could continue to operate their business. But all that just stopped. So whoever that business owner is has some choices. What they can do is they can try to cut their expenses, find other ways to get a little bit of new income, or if it's dire enough, they can decide, I can't do this. We're done. This business is over. Call it bankruptcy or just closing up shop, whatever you want to call it. Or they can go to their local bank and say, hey, listen, I'm going to be open for business again here in 30 or 60 days. And when that happens, all my cash flows will start again. And I can operate my business, and I need a loan from you to get me through that 60 days. And the bank says, yes, no, maybe so, whatever. Because everything is happening on a systemic level, the Federal Reserve is needing to go and backstop all of those banks, all of those financial institutions, and say, go give out credit. Go give out these loans. All of these people's businesses are going to eventually come back, and we will backstop what you're doing. So the ones that don't work out, don't worry. We'll take the losses for that, because we just need to get money out to these people and businesses and so on and so forth. That's kind of what's going on with the Fed right now, is they're trying to act as the final, what they call the lender of last resort. When nobody else will lend money, the Fed will, and right now the Fed's trying to stimulate all of the other parties that can lend money to do so by guaranteeing whatever act.
Wow, that was a lot of data compressed into a really short period of time. So how can we unpack this to kind of make sense for the rest of us? Kind of the basic thing is that the Fed is the one who's still able to lend even when other banks aren't able to. So it kind of keeps banks from collapsing.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're guaranteeing, right? So they're
Mhm.
loaning, so they're setting the base rate. I mean, what was clear was apparently the Federal Reserve, I know, is not a federal institution. So to answer that question, Raul, it's not government, but it's not government. So the Federal Reserve
That's clear, right?
got founded in 1913 by an act of Congress, and they were basically mandated as a private institution to control inflation and deflation. So we want stable prices. We all want to be able to not have a gallon of milk be 1 week $20 and the next week it's $2. And so they're trying to stabilize pricing for America. And then since then, it's kind of expanded its role in the economy, and it focuses try to keep unemployment minimized while also keeping stable prices. And then recently, the guarantor. So that was a recap of what he said. If we just broke it down to 3 bullet points. But yeah, it's the main way that they do things is they are responsible for setting the rates at which the banks borrow money. So by lowering those rates, it makes it easier for banks to borrow money and easier for them to then loan money to us small businesses applying for loans, trying to cover our expenses and or expand. Now,
but the question was, where did the $1 trillion come from?
And that's the part that even after he explains everything, I struggle with. Like, how do they just print this money? Like, can they print forever?
Right. They're bailing essentially the whole economy. So if we have this kind of event happen again, like, can they continue to do this?
So that was actually the question that I did pose to Jack immediately. And I have a recording of Jack answering that too, if you guys are ready.
Do it.
Here's what he had to say.
In a word, no, the Fed can't run out of money. It's slightly more complicated than that. Technically, the Fed's in charge of the printing press. So they can print money to forever. And in fact, they do print a lot of money. But at some point, even though they never run out of quote unquote money, that money can cease to have sufficient value. So if you print too much of it, it becomes essentially valueless. And if it becomes valueless, then it doesn't matter how much they print of it. So no, the Fed can't run out of money, but they can make money worthless. I would guess, and this is just my opinion, but I would guess we're probably far away from that. The dollar is still the strongest currency in the world, which is maybe how you would measure whether there's confidence in the Fed's balance sheet or not. But there is a point where psychologically, in the system itself, which is basically just made up of everybody's opinion on the value of a thing in the United States and around the world, at some point that becomes the Fed prints so much money, lends so much money out, guarantees so much money that their act of doing that becomes worthless and the money starts to lose its value. And when that happens, people will start using something else to transact in because it will no longer hold the psychological power that it currently does.
Welcome, Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah, no, it's wild that it's, in essence, the psychology is what gives it value. That we all deem the U.S. government and the U.S. country as a nation stable enough that we trust it as the backer of the money.
It sounds like it's all made up. I mean, we've talked about this before. You know, it's like all our value, and I've mentioned, like, why isn't water the value? You know, like, it's just
Yeah.
I don't know.
But that's true, though. As long as we were agreed, then it could be.
Mm-hmm.
We could ship jugs of water. That would just be a lot heavier than I mean, we're already starting. So we're starting to understand, okay, so they're pumping, I mean, upwards of $6 trillion into the system. The 2.3 trillion you referred to, Raul, is just a very specific part of a bigger picture, which is like $6 trillion. So the money going to people is its own amount of money, and the money going to businesses is and unemployment is its own amount of money, and the money going here is its own amount of money. But the actual overall, the Federal Reserve is pumping something like $6 trillion into the economy, and I think,
crazy.
According to, I might be misquoting him, but I think that represents something like around $30,000 a person.
It's like, why stop at 6 trillion? Why not to make up a gazillion? Like, why stop at that specific number? It sounds random.
Yeah, I think that's part of what Jack was talking about. If you print too much, so like this is what their mandate is. Do enough to make things stay stable. Don't do too much, or else we'll have massive inflation where the dollar's not worth as much anymore. Now all of a sudden a carton of eggs is, $20. And, it's just inflation. The dollar just isn't worth very much. And then you start to trickle down into a much bigger problem in the world, since the entire world currently uses the US dollar relatively as it's like a measure of global economy.
I see. That makes sense.
Hey, you've got money questions. We've got money answers. It's Just Money Live is coming up. Check out our Facebook page for details. Make sure you don't miss your opportunity to participate. All right, we'll see you then.
So that's enough about the Federal Reserve. We're all wondering, when are we going to get back to work? I've been stuck in my house for the last few weeks, and I want to be able to go out and do things. But what's the risk going back? Are we going to see an uptick in people getting sick? Am I going to get sick going back to work? What are our thoughts about that? I know Jared had some real good thoughts about that. So what do you have to say?
Well, yeah, so I've had to talk with a lot of people. So small business owners have been calling. I've had to talk with my own employees, other people's employees. It's very confusing because we're at the same time having the worst week as far as deaths and expectations, right? So that's happening right now. They're also in the middle of this. They've now downgraded 2 or 3 times how many expectations for deaths. So all this good news as far as like, hey, not nearly as many people are going to die. Clearly, social distancing is working, which also means, hey, now we're speeding up into the same week because good news is happening. All of a sudden, the conversation is exploding about when will we go back to work. I'm still in this week wrapping up conversations with people, trying to get them to have to see outside of the 2 weeks already. So for instance, I've been having conversations with people where they don't necessarily, even if they could work from home, there's like one conversation where it's just like, well, why do I have to work and nobody else has to work, and they're getting unemployment and these benefits and supposedly going to make more money than if I would almost make more money if I just don't work and get time off. It's like, okay, that's fine. So that's like one conversation. But then I've had another extreme of conversation, which is people who don't feel safe. So then people are like, well, am I going to have to go? Like, I don't feel safe to go back to work. So what happens in 6 weeks if they say it's time to go back to work? Is it safe? And so I've been trying to get people to, I've been asking these series of questions. If you don't feel safe, because there's the same risk profile, how is it going to be less risky 6 weeks from now as it will be 8 weeks from now? So let's say you wait 2 more weeks. What is it going to look like 10 weeks from now? Are you now somehow safer? How long do I need to stay at home before I've completely removed COVID-19 risk? And the answer at this point is 12 to 18 months. And I can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been trying to help people just kind of think through, like, unless your plan is to stay at home for the next 18 months and not leave, your risk profile isn't really changing, whether it's 6 weeks from now or 8 weeks from now or 10 weeks from now. And even so, in the U.S., ultimately 98% of people recover just fine, even now, in our bad times.
Mm-hmm. So it makes me think of kind of a classic psychology problem that we deal with as humans, is that we are really bad at judging and dealing with long-term risks. So our brains were really built to deal with immediate risks. Our eyes are drawn to things that move because you want to be drawn to things that move, because if something's coming at you to attack you, to hurt you physically, you need to be able to react to it. So our systems can travel, you can get that burst of adrenaline to run or to fight. Things happen really quickly. And so you can assess risk immediately very well. But some of the consequence of that ability, that survival ability, is that it makes us really poor at judging long-term risk. Because
that's exactly what I feel like that's a great illustration of the conversations I feel like I've been having. They've been very frustrating at times, where I'm trying to get people to think about 6 weeks from now or 8 weeks from now, and they just keep going back to the next 2 weeks. not feeling safe now, and so they can't imagine feeling safe later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's hard to emotionally feel what you're going to feel like in 6 weeks. You know, you're projecting what you feel now onto the future, because that's all you know. So
how do you guys feel? Do you feel like, I mean, do you feel like if you were at work right now, everything would be fine? Does it feel like an overreaction that we were shut down to the extent we were? I will say, before I make either of you answer that, hindsight is always 20/20, right? So if the numbers spiking even higher, if Kansas had spiked worse, we'd all be like, no, it's really good we did. But how about for you guys and your jobs, and how many people you react with, or people like, what are the conversations you're having with people?
I mean, I'm lucky enough to work from home, and so there's been a pro and con to what I've discovered of working from home myself. Like, I kind of enjoy it, even though I wish I was at the office. Like, you have all the amenities, all the good coffee, where there's no good coffee at the office. Like it just seems like I'm going a little bit crazy while I'm working, but at the same time, I've got everything I need around me. I feel like you can't be too upset about first world problems.
Like you said, I work an office job too, so I feel like my biggest risk was that in the building has a shared bathroom between the different offices. That was my biggest risk spot, was that, like, there's even a side door I could have came in. So I think going back to work, one, I don't have to because I can work remotely, but I think my risk level is pretty low. And I've actually been sick like all of last week. I don't know if it was COVID or just something, and so there's that part of me too. It's like so, kind of just done being sick.
There's a lot of drama around this, the idea of opening back up the economy, and people feel like you're putting people at risk. With the death rates coming down, I've started to ask I would love someone to give me a graph that shows if we get down to, like, nobody wants to put a number on how many people it's okay if there's more people that die, if that makes sense. Like, nobody wants to be that person, but at the same time, like, I'm wondering how many fewer people are dying because we're not driving. There's no traffic accidents. There's no flights. There's less exposure to, like, the flu. Just people who die from the flu. There are less people guaranteed to be dying now from the flu because everybody's cleaning so much and wearing masks and not going to work. So my question is, are more people at this point, if that number gets down to whatever it is, 40,000, 30,000, are more people going to survive than die? If you subtract how many people don't die because we're just living life so different versus COVID. I've literally started to wonder, like, before it was really obvious, but now that what happens if they ratchet it down to 30,000? It's like, how many people die every day just in car accidents? And so which is weird because this is still, again, this is the same week that's our worst week, most deaths. All of a sudden we're we're beginning to see a flattening of a curve potentially. If we do go back to work, though, are we just going to spike it back up? And now all of our sacrifices were for naught?
Yeah.
We actually end up right back where we were. So why do we do it? And then, as Jack said, the Fed can't just keep printing money or it becomes worthless.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, though, because is the virus going to die off completely, or is it still going to be around when we just have vaccines for it, which I'm not sure the timeline on those vaccines still. So
12 months, 18 months is the minimum, as they say, 12 months and 18 months. So that's why I've been trying to tell people is the government can't print money forever. This is a finite resource. So I've been having a giving and taking sometimes to help people think about it, because a lot of people will be like, well, I might as well not work. I make the same amount of money. I'm like, but then you're just a taker. If you can work right now, if you have a job that you can work from home. So for instance, Raul, if you could go get your full income, and like right now, it's kind of unfair that you're working compared to unfair. It's awesome, right? You get to, you're not taking from a system that there is a finite amount of resources, and there's people who need unemployment, and they're going to need it. And if less people took from it who didn't need it, maybe they could even extend it to 10 weeks if this gets dragged out longer versus 8 weeks. And so I've been having this almost challenging people to rethink their conversation. Like, I hear people say, and I would never want to call somebody out, like in public, but it's like, you're just taking. That's taking. It's other people need that. That's like saying it's like the toilet paper thing. People who have plenty of toilet paper and then go and buy more. It's like quick.
Right.
And you almost have to have that mentality with unemployment. Like if you don't need it and you can keep your job, or if you could go to part-time and then just do part-time unemployment, that is better.
Mm-hmm.
And like we need to think of ourselves as doing our part.
To end our episode, I want to know how you guys have been spending your quarantine time. For me, I spent some time with this guy, Mr. Mandela. I got this huge book for Christmas like 4 years ago, and I was in grad school. I don't know why I asked for it, but now I'm reading it, so it's been good.
Nice. I've been doing some light reading on subliminal advertising.
Wow. Yeah, that's usually what I consider light reading. Yes.
You guys are like champions. I actually sitting here right in this chair every morning. I do another row or two, so it's still sitting here. Shane?
Crochet.
Are you turning that into a face mask?
I'm real good face mask with all these holes. Yeah, no, I've been trying to make a new hat so I could wear it. So my wife taught me how to do that. I already had to start over once. I hope that I make it through this one.
Thank you for listening or watching It's Just Money. We hope you enjoyed the episode. If so, please subscribe so you don't miss out.
Also, leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have any suggestions for future episodes, please comment below.
But remember, it's just money.